Mount up! We're coming!
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And once again, on a Monday night, in about a half an hour, Manny Hill will join to pick the Vikings' final record. And I can't imagine how high we're going with that final record now that the Minnesota Vikings are 11-2. And we have now reached the point where absolutely nobody in their right mind, even the biggest Sam Darnold believer, ever would have thought that they would be at this point in the season. But seeing the way that it played out was always the best case scenario. I don't think we ever could have said best case scenario is he's top 3 in the league in passer rating and they're 11-2. All right, that would have been a little bit too far for even the biggest Sam Darnold believer. However, I saw a lot of tweets the other day yesterday, after Sam Darnold had one of the best games in Vikings history. And I saw, hey, this person didn't think that Sam Darnold was going to be any good. And this person said it was a bad signing for the Vikings. And let's all point and laugh at them. Now, if you go back here on the old Purple Insider show, the reason that I thought it was a good signing when they added Sam Darnold was I considered the other bridge quarterback options to get to JJ McCarthy, and we all knew that they were going to draft a quarterback, so I considered the other bridge options, which were Jacoby Brissett or Ryan Tannehill or just guys with no upside whatsoever. And my thought was that what the Vikings would be able to do with their supporting casts, with their coach, with their wide receivers, with their offensive tackles, and even an improved interior offensive line. It's not perfect as we saw, but it's certainly better than in the past. And I had seen Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs have some success with Kevin O'Connell and these receivers and this offense and thought maybe, and I don't know how many times over the offseason and over the summer, we said maybe people would ask in the comments, could this be like a Jeff George thing or a Randall Cunningham thing where the guy shows up and it just works? And I said, maybe. I mean, I don't see why not, but I also don't think it's that likely of a thing to happen. And as the season progressed, and the first game, I was in East Rutherford and we did the post-game show, myself and Dane Mizutani. And I remember talking about how Sam Darnold did such a great job of game managing. And if Darnold just manages the game, makes one or two really nice plays per game, then they can win with defense and they could be a playoff team. And this could go pretty well for them. And they can survive the year without JJ McCarthy. That was the thought. If he could just kind of play like that, just one big throw down the sideline, that'll work. And then, hey, check it down underneath, get it to Jefferson when you can, run the football with Aaron Jones, play defense, and you could be one of those teams that's kind of plucky and kind of solid and maybe not a contender, but you're going to make the playoffs, right? And make things interesting. And then as the first 5 weeks played out, we had the extreme up of the roller coaster where everybody starts talking about Darnold as an MVP. And we're talking about MVPs through 4 weeks. What are we doing here? And the Jets game, the 2 losses, they took the shine off a little bit, and the Jaguars game happens. And I think even in the Vikings building, there was nervousness. And I am not saying that as if like anyone said to me, oh, we're worried he's going to fall apart. But I'm just assuming that everyone, you, me, everyone who watches the team, everyone who's around the team was concerned that Darnold was going to throw the season away because he's too reckless with the football. And what Kevin O'Connell did in that moment and what Sam Darnold did in that moment was went back to the drawing board and said, this is a problem. That type of performance is a problem. How can we make sure that doesn't happen again? Let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to the basics of the offense. Let's pay attention to all the details. Let's study what went wrong and then build off of that and go forward. And that right there, coming out of the Jaguars game, that response and the way he's played quarterback since then, it hasn't been the game manager who makes 1 or 2 plays per game. It hasn't been the guy who just is going to allow the defense to win the game for you and try not to screw up. It's been the guy coming out of that game. He was the guy in Tennessee. He was, even against Indianapolis, he was fantastic, but also had, some interceptions in that game that increased the concern that was going to be a problem. But then Tennessee, the light seems to come on for Sam Darnold, the difference between protecting the football, but also making big plays. And it felt like it just built and built and built up to that game with Atlanta. And I thought that his game against Chicago, when we were doing that post game, I thought that was the best game we've seen from Sam Darnold. And then he comes back and then tops that performance against the Atlanta Falcons with 5 touchdowns, all of them earned. 4 of them, according to PFF, were under pressure, which is even more wild when you think about that most quarterbacks are struggling under pressure, and he threw 4 touchdowns yesterday under pressure. So it was remarkable to watch Darnold and his complete command of the offense from start to finish that game, even when they banged him up a little bit early on. And there was a lot of reaction to that and the struggles on offense, but he kept coming back and figuring out how to make plays, taking advantage of his receivers, converting on third downs, playing a lot of the game. The highlight is going to be the 52-yard touchdown to Jefferson, hands down. But how about 2 of the red zone touchdowns to Jordan Addison, which are just good decisions at the goal line, solid passes in time, and bang, you're in the end zone, playing with timing and drop it back, hitting the back foot, finding your guy, and then getting rid of the football, all that sort of stuff that Sam Darnold's never been known for before. It feels like he's just taking another step and another step and another step each week to become a complete quarterback who is fully locked in to the Minnesota Vikings offense and has reached this level that now what we can say is that Sam Darnold can take them places potentially. We never know what's going to happen in the playoffs. Well, what's it going to look like when they get to the playoffs? I have no idea. If any of us had any idea what it was ever going to look like in the playoffs, well, you'd make a lot of money gambling. But we never know what exactly is going to happen when we get to the playoffs. And one bad game could mean that everybody changes their opinion about Darnold, or he could continue to do this and win 4 games and be Eli Manning and be a legend forever. I don't know. But the point is that those outcomes, the highest end of those outcomes yesterday became possible, I think. The entire time we're sort of going, well, he's playing really well. He's playing great. He's not turning the ball over. He's made some really high-end throws. I wrote about it last week about how Darnold, his arm talent is really changing how they design the offense and how the receivers have to be ready for pretty much anything. And that was absolutely true on Sunday. But we were still at a point where we were going, we'll see. We'll see where he goes from here. It's a big game against Atlanta. How's he going to respond? There's reports out there about his future, and everyone's talking about it. Is that going to get in his head? Is there going to be pressure facing off with Kirk Cousins? And he goes out there and has one of the best games in Vikings history. Yesterday, everything got put on the table for the Minnesota Vikings. And I got questions from my friends and from you guys. Hey, why isn't the national media talking about the Vikings that were 10-2? I think it's because with Darnold, you're waiting for a big enough sample size and a signature type of moment, signature type of play to be able to say, no, they're in that conversation. And when we look at the other teams in the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles, who apparently I just found out today, because I haven't been covering the Eagles, that they've got an issue between their quarterback and their number 1 wide receiver. So however much you already appreciate Justin Jefferson, turn that up even one more notch for how Justin Jefferson has navigated this entire thing this season, where there's been some ups and downs for him. And before Jamar Chase plays today, number 1 in the NFL in receiving yards, and zero, the biggest stat on the board for Jefferson, zero drama. Zero drama from Justin Jefferson, number 1 in yardage before Monday Night Football. I mean, impressive stuff. When you think about who else could play quarterback other than Kirk Cousins, if you don't pay him, then who are you going to get? Well, part of it that had to be considered is that wide receiver is going to make everybody better. And he certainly did. He certainly did yesterday. And he made Addison better because all of his opportunities are one-on-one. I don't know if I've ever seen Jordan Addison doubled. And look at what he's able to do when he's got one-on-one coverage. And Sam Darnold has now come to fully understand what Addison can do when Jefferson's covered. It felt like for a little bit that there was this kind of, I got to force it to Jefferson. And instead, he ends up throwing it to Addison on a bunch of these one-on-one deep balls because he's building that trust. Andrew, I do remember you. Yes. Andrew says, do you remember me? Asked if anyone wanted to wager me $1,000 that Sam Darnold would be a top 10 quarterback. And your response was, what would the basis be? The answer was, it would have mattered. I would have won. So here's the thing though, Andrew, you have to remember, because I do remember your message, and I do remember you trying to bet $1,000 that I wouldn't take that bet, that I would not bet against you when it came to that. I mean, somebody might have, but the possibility always was there that he could play like a top 10 quarterback. And every single thing that had to go right for that has gone right for that. They've blocked for him. He's adopted the offense. The receivers have made plays that, I mean, the receipts are there for me for supporting the Sam Darnold move from day one and then coming home from training camp every day, dialing it up live and saying, hey, this could be a thing because Darnold had such a good training camp. No, I did not expect them to be 11-2. No, I had them at 9-8 with Sam Darnold because I didn't think that they would be this consistently good on a week in and week out basis. And even after Jacksonville, I wrote the Sam Darnold experience is going to have ups and downs. That's just how it's going to be. You got to hope for the peak. Well, maybe there is downs on the other side of the next couple of games, but I think we've also reached a point where we could say, if you have to talk about the one bad game that the guy had over and over and over again, that means he didn't have many bad games. He has been one of the most consistently excellent quarterbacks in the entire NFL. That's where, no matter how much money you were willing to put down, I mean, even you couldn't have guessed that Sam Darnold was going to be one of the best and most consistent quarterbacks week in and week out, over and over again. It has become one of the best, if not the best story in the NFL this year, that this guy has gone from somebody who was kind of left for dead, bridge quarterback, $10 million coming in here. Well, Kirk Cousins is making $45 million to be 6-7 on the season. And this is what Darnold has made of it. So I'm curious about, from the comment section, I'll answer some of your questions about other stuff. Darnold, for another 15 minutes until Manny gets here, and then we'll pick the schedule as we always do. But favorite moments. What was your favorite moment of Sam Darnold's win against the Atlanta Falcons? Because that's one where 10 years from now, you're going to see that pop up in your YouTube and you're going to watch that football game. That's one where when you talk to your friends about, hey, the Vikings, it's the year 2035. Assume that the world still exists and they're playing the Falcons. Who knows who's quarterback in 2035? And you go, hey, remember that game where Kirk came back and Darnold lit him up, and that rollout for Jefferson and the people in the building. And I found this out yesterday after the game and was sad about it because the people in the building will remember Sam Darnold pumping up the crowd toward the end of the game. I only found out from social media that was not shown on TV. That is really unfortunate because Brian O'Neill called it one of the coolest moments inside that stadium that he's ever seen. Teammates were pumped up. Kevin O'Connell said he got emotional. And the Vikings did tweet out a GIF of it without the sound. The sound, it was an explosion inside the stadium when Sam Darnold did this, when he actually showed some of the pent up emotion that has been there from, it was kind of like the whole journey coming together right there. Like, yeah, this is real. This is me. This is who I am. And for him to get up and, swing the towel and be like, let's go. That was really something. I mean, I just wish the Fox broadcast had caught it. I guess they must not have. And it wasn't even just at the end of the game. It was, I think, during a TV timeout when Atlanta had the football, and it was during a break that they showed him on the side and he did that. But that'll be something for people in the building that they'll remember as kind of like a culmination of all the things that have come together for Darnold. So that's the one that I'm going to remember. That and the 52-yard touchdown are probably the two biggest ones. But there was a lot. I mean, there was so many plays where it's 3rd down and 6 or something, and he's got to find somebody open. I asked Kevin O'Connell today what he saw on tape that maybe he didn't realize when he was just watching the game. And he talked about a lot of the 3rd downs that looked like pitches and catches to Jefferson or Addison or in the red zone that were much more high difficulty than that. And it was not some sort of pumped up play action, just say a couple open wide receivers. This was a quarterback making high level play after high level play after high level play. And I know what everybody wants to talk about. I know everybody wants to talk about his future. I went on a couple radio stations today, as often happens, just as the guest. And that's what are they going to resign him? What are they going to do? My thing is, that's a really fun discussion to have. And I think that we've all become off-season pilled and front office, playing GM type of armchair GM. Like, and nobody loves that more than me. That's like what a lot of the show has been built on for many years. But think about this. I was thinking about this yesterday. Purple Insider started in 2020. So I've been doing the show since then. Before that, it was on 1500 ESPN and brought it over to Purple Insider. One playoff game has been covered by this media outlet. One season where they went and won 13 games and then immediately lost in the playoffs. And that was it. Drink it in. Hold yourself back from thinking about what they're going to do in the future and just live in the moment a little. There'll be a whole offseason for that. Like, I want to talk about yesterday. I don't want to talk about tomorrow yet. Why don't we talk about yesterday and what a legendary moment this was for the Vikings franchise? I mean, you guys know I like to go back and watch all these old games, watch Dante Culpepper throw 5 touchdowns in 2004, watch Randall Cunningham light it up, watch the one season where somehow Jim McMahon got him into the playoffs or got him a winning record, watch Warren Moon. Like, this is one that you're going to want to think about for a long time. And it's probably a season that you're going to want to think about for a long time. And the other part of yesterday, as far as like favorite parts, was the building feeling it. And Kevin O'Connell mentioned that too. And I thought there was a little bit of a malaise against the Cardinals. Like, come on, guys, just prove that you're legit and let's get out of here. But against Atlanta, the momentum built. And in the second half, that place was electric because everyone was feeling it's December. This team's 11-2 and this quarterback's playing like that. It's real. This is real. And that moment right there. I mean, how many has Purple Insider gotten over these last, what are we on? Season 5 now of Purple Insider? Not too many. The only comparable one I would say is in Buffalo, when they beat the Bills. And then the very next week they lose 40-3. So, yeah, can't have that happen against the Bears this week. Anything can happen when it comes to these division games. But that overall feeling as the game was coming to an end, it's kind of a party atmosphere in there. When you're up 21, the 98-yard drive where it's mostly handing the football off. We've never seen O'Connell do that before. All that stuff was kind of, something is going on here with this team. It is a special year that only comes along every so often. So we could think about contracts and all of you front office people who I love and we talk about all the time, their future and how they're going to salary cap and everything. Your team is in the driver's seat in the NFC. Detroit, and Philadelphia and Green Bay and you. And maybe you don't want to play the Rams. And that's it. Those are all the teams that belong in your ballpark. Philadelphia's got issues with their quarterback and receiver. And Detroit's got issues with injuries. And the Packers are pretty good, but you beat them. So I don't know. I mean, this down the stretch here is got a different energy than any other team outside of 2017 that I've covered for the Vikings. Brett points out that the point differential is now plus 99. That should shut up some of the naysayers. Yeah, it was a bit of a tough day for the naysayer, but I think a lot of people, I just think the one score game thing is more nuanced. It's not a mistake that Patrick Mahomes wins all of them. And every game around the league is a one score game. And when the Eagles barely beat the Panthers, you're not paying that close of attention to them. So you go, okay, they won. All right. What did the Vikings? I'm more worried about the Vikings, right? Because that's your team. But there's the one score games are everywhere. It's really how you lose and how you win your big games like this against the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, that was a team that was top of their division and you blow them out. And yeah, and I also said too, that the entry fee to get into the Super Bowl conversation is what? It's at least 11 wins, usually 12. So you're one win away from that. And it's plus 100 and you're already there. If you got those two things and a top 10 passing game, which the Vikings have, then you're legit. Then you have just as good a chance as anybody. And that's where they're at. So it is quite a situation to be in, man. Quite a situation to be in. Brett says, I'm concerned about the Bears. Someone should check on them. I said this all last week because Kirk threw 4 interceptions. And so I said, just when you think you got it all figured out, that something happens that completely changes, or a team like the Falcons suddenly just plays a really good game. And they did play a good half, and Kirk played a good half and had them in a position where he tied the game, late and at 21-21 and had a chance to be in that game. So with the Bears, the way that Caleb Williams is way up and down, division game, Monday Night Football, you can never just assume that that's going to be a win because Caleb is extremely, extremely talented. But that franchise in the battle of the rebuilds, Vikings versus Bears, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is annihilating Ryan Poles in that situation. That was the story when they took over. Poles went to Chicago. Kwesi gets hired here. All right, let's see the battle of the builds. They're going to tank. You're not going to tank. Competitive rebuild versus tank. How's it going to play out? Well, one team is 11-2 and has the coach of the year. The other team is floundering, fired their coach, has lost to like the Patriots, played terribly last week after firing their coach. They didn't even get a coach firing pop. Yikes. Pretty tough situation. Rich says, Matt, don't you love how all the Kirk lovers quietly converted to Darnold? Well, they're Vikings fans, right? I mean, who the quarterback is the person that fans are going to root for. So, I think there were, like with any quarterback, there were irrational Cousins fans on both extremes. There were irrational to the point of thinking that the guy didn't belong in the league. And there's irrational to the point where they thought it was the right guard's fault the whole time. And like that's how it goes with anybody. I had this conversation with someone in the NFL about how just this sort of machine works with social media and how everything has to be extremes in all of the discussions with social media. A team trades a player and then they're the stupidest team ever. And then wait, the trade worked out. Now they're smarter. Their front office knows what to do it. Like everything is extremes all the time with this. And it probably is in other industries too. The Taylor Swift people probably think Taylor Swift is the greatest musical artist ever. And they fight people online all day about it. Like that's kind of being fanatical, being a fan of it. But Vikings fans, okay, if you liked Kirk Cousins, that doesn't mean you can't love Sam Darnold. We also just don't need to own everybody all the time. Like, let's pick our spots to own people. It's like I said about, this particular podcast, and there's the receipts all over the place, liked the idea of signing Sam Darnold. But if there were other podcasts or people who didn't like it, well, they had plenty of evidence to work with, and we never know how it's going to play out. Like, plenty of evidence to suggest maybe he wasn't that good. So this is another thing that sometimes you just have to kind of move on from that. Like, hey, like own the haters all the time. Like, just enjoy Sam Darnold playing football. You don't have to tell all the Kirk people that they were stupid. Like, they wanted Kirk to win because they wanted the team to win. I always understood that. And nobody fought with the Kirk people more than me over the years, but I always understood the reason was they were trying to talk themselves into something that wasn't really there, but they wanted to because they wanted it to work because they wanted their team to win. So I'm not being that way. For me, it's more about Rick Spielman and the decision making around Kirk Cousins, the extension after 2019, continuing to bring him back, continuing to think that's the answer, how they attempted to build around him. That was always why did the organization keep going back to the same thing that didn't work? That's what it was more about for me than necessarily about him. But boy, you really found something in Sam Darnold the way he's playing. Tommy says, wonder what your thought is on the difference between Fabian Morrow over Dwight McGlothern and how much difference in play for the vet and the undrafted rookie. If the gap isn't that far, play the kid. Fabian Morrow was tremendous yesterday. He was great. He was targeted one time in the game. Fabian Morrow has been a starter in the league for a long time. He's a good player. Dwight McGlothern is another, and hey, Gabe Murphy played yesterday. I played 28 snaps. They are really gifted at finding these undrafted free agent guys, or heck, the Jalen Redmond, the guy who's kind of nowhere, right? So they're good at that. And I think McGlothern is going to be one of those types of guys that they do develop into a legitimate player. But Fabian Morrow has thousands of snaps in the NFL and can be trusted to play in high leverage of big moments. They signed him for that. He was going to start if they didn't get Stephon Gilmore. He's an average NFL player who's just been behind a very healthy group. And McGlothern needs to develop. He needs to just learn the ropes and learn how to play, but he certainly has potential for the future. All right, let us welcome in Mr. Manny Hill. What is going on, Manny? What a day it is. We've got a lot of questions and comments stacked up, so I want to answer some with you first before we get into picking the rest of the schedule. Plus, there's not that many games left to pick, so we'll do that. But just give me your feeling after watching what transpired at US Bank Stadium yesterday.
Whew, Sam Darnold was a beast yesterday. I mean, he was he made all the throws, man. He made all the plays. And I mean, Atlanta's defense is really bad. Really, really, really bad. Especially in the second half when you saw they got like no pass rush whatsoever late in the game. But yeah, no, it was just, I think what we saw from that offense was just really, really impressive, the way they were able to run the ball. Aaron Jones had a nice game. Even Cam Akers stepped in and made some nice runs. But the story of the game for me is Sam Darnold and his performance. This is, when you're talking about teams that can potentially go on a run, these are the kind of performances you can see from their quarterbacks when they can go on a deep playoff run. And that was just impressive stuff. The way Addison and Jefferson dominated the game, dominated the Atlanta secondary, was just fantastic. And I think it really showed that I think the Vikings made the right decision by moving on and going in a different direction at quarterback after last year.
And if you don't even talk about this in some sort of spiteful way, which is what always ends up coming back to, and current parties are absolutely guilty of this. But when you just look at the way Kirk Cousins is playing, a major part of that whole analysis was the guy is coming off of an Achilles tear. And what Kirk said to us before he exited stage left was, the Achilles will heal. I'm a pocket quarterback. But the thing is that the Achilles doesn't just go zoop and then it's good and then you're all good to go. It clearly removes any ability to explode off of that leg. And I think what Dan Marino had to have a custom shoe built because it never was the same again. And I know that was a long time ago. And that's also the GOAT when it comes to an arm. So he was able to recover from that. And he never was quite exactly the same as he was earlier in his career. And that's the literal one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But you could see it yesterday with the lack of confidence, the lack of velocity, and even when trying to put the touch on the ball, it just wasn't the same. And as the Vikings went to make that decision, they had to weigh that part of it of how is this guy going to recover from that and then come back and play at a high level? And what I couldn't help but envision was if Cousins had come back and he plays a couple of good games and then he plays a couple of horrible games and we're all doing what? Even if they draft another if they draft another quarterback and he hadn't gotten injured in preseason or something, we'd be doing the same thing as them. Is it time to bench Kirk? Is it time to move on? But also, they'd be hovering around 500. And what would we be talking about? The coach isn't calling the right plays. Oh, well, did you see the defense yesterday? Wasn't as good as it was supposed to be because all defenses don't just shut everybody down like it's 2000 again. And I just thought about what a difference it makes 3 to 4 plays per game. And I was going to ask you the headline question, your favorite moment from the game, because for me, it's the action as far as playing. It's not a hot take. It's the 52-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson. It's an all-world play. It's an Allen. It's a Mahomes. It is a Joe Burrow. It's like only the best talents make that play. And just that, but it's also so definitive of what the problem was. The problem was that play's not there. And if it's not there, everyone else is going to get blamed all the time. And I'm sure they're doing it in Atlanta. I'm sure their talk shows are going, well, the corners fell down and they got to be better. And it's not all Kirk's fault. And it's like, oh yeah, that's circle of hell. And the fact that that was not how it played out here and watching it right in front of me was almost like, look at, that's what it is. And that's what it could have been. Whoa. Oh, Manny's head froze. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry. All right. You're back. So what was your favorite moment in that game?
It's the same one. I mean, you said it. I mean, it's Josh Allen, Mahomes, the ability to extend the plays. Matthew, that's a sack if it's Kirk Cousins. Without question, that's a sack. And we're talking about a completely different situation here. If that's Kirk Cousins in that situation. And that's going to sound like we're just bagging on Kirk, but that's just the reality of the difference between the two quarterbacks right now. That is the difference between 36 years old, never really a mobile quarterback, even going back to his days in college at Michigan State, never really like the strongest arm. And you have Sam Darnold, who is a really good athlete and really physically gifted and was able to maneuver around. I after the game, I just for kicks, I kind of went back and watched the 2017 Rose excuse me, the 2017 Rose Bowl, USC and Penn State. And Sam Darnold, even then, you just, I mean, he didn't have any plays like what he did with the long pass to Jefferson, but you just look at some of the throws that he was making, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, before Adam Gase got a hold of him, you know what I mean? It was like, oh yeah, I was just seeing some of those throws earlier this afternoon. That's right. Same kind of thing. And you just really, it kind of reinforces that the overall like talent that this guy has. And it was on full display yesterday. The athleticism, being able to move around, extend plays, even on some of the, like, just the simple bootleg plays that they did yesterday were really, really effective and good and executed well. I don't think it can be overstated the decision that the Minnesota Vikings made to move on from Kirk Cousins and to go get a younger, more athletic, more physically talented quarterback in Sam Darnold. And we're getting sort of the high end of what, Sam Darnold was thought that he could be when he was coming out of USC until Adam Gase got a hold of him.
He really was a special college prospect. I mean, I went back and read this week because I was writing about his arm talent. What a week to write about his arm talent. I mean, I was asking they were picking on me in the media room for how many people I was asking about his arm talent for this article, purpleinsider.football. Go check it out. But what everybody was saying, the one quote that really popped to me was Wes Phillips saying, when you have a guy who can stay with downfield reads, no matter what happens with the pocket, if it becomes muddy, if he gets pushed back, if he has Dalton Reisner right in his face, and he could still get the throw down the field enough to Jordan Addison, everything becomes possible with the offense. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing what's truly possible for Jordan Addison, which is a guy becoming a star in front of our eyes. What's truly possible for Justin Jefferson, which is, before Jamar Chase plays on Monday Night Football, the number one receiver in the league in terms of yardage. Amazing that they figured it out, how to get him the football. Figured it would be okay after a game or two where he didn't have, 100 yards. But we're really seeing the maximum of what can be done with an offense where it doesn't have to be held back by, but Kirk won't make that throw. And you got to get him more open. And I remember Jay Gruden saying this one time, and Jay Gruden was a big Kirk fan. He won a lot of games with Kirk, and he wanted him to stay. But Jay Gruden said something like, I can't get everybody wide open for you all the time. You have to be able to throw it in there. And now we're seeing a guy who is willing to throw it in there into those windows. Let me give you another low key, less noticeable favorite moment to me, which is, so the Falcons score a quick touchdown to make it 21-21. And at that point, there's still a little nerves in the building because the defense was so gassed, and they get an extra day this week. I think that will help. There's another point that I think is important about the defense with some of the players emerging for them that maybe we didn't expect, guys who are going to rotate in over these last couple of games, but they tie the game, and they did it very fast. It was like lightning up and down the field. And Sam Darnold gets the ball back. And the first play is Blake Brandel jumping offside, or false start. So -5. They hand off to Cam Akers. Grady Jarrett still just put him in that wall of fame of guys who kill the Vikings every single time. Good job, Grady Jarrett. 2-yard loss. It is now 2nd and 17. And then they get a defensive, or Grady Jarrett jumps offside because he was having way too much fun. So it's 2nd down and 12. And Darnold finds Hockenson for a 14-yard gain, 1st down. And then after that, he converts a 3rd and 5 with an 11-yard pass to Jordan Addison. And it was just one of those, this is what oh yeah. Okay. So I missed the play. I scrolled down too far, but he converts that 2nd down and long after they got set back. Then he hits Addison for a huge 42-yard catch. And then he ends up throwing the touchdown to Addison. So the response drive, that's my point. Sorry, yeah. I can't read the play-by-play as well as I should be able to. But the point is just that response drive to put them up 28-21. That was the moment where the building's getting nervous, and Kirk has just led a touchdown drive, and the defense is clearly completely gassed. And then you start off with a false start and a 2-yard run backwards, and it's like, oh boy, here we go. There is no here we go again to Sam Darnold. There is no, oh man, we gave up some points to the Packers. I guess they're going to just come back on us. He just keeps going. And that was one of those where the game really turned, I thought, where they get that touchdown.
And we have seen that happen multiple times now this year, going all the way back to the Green Bay game where Vikings have this big 28-0 lead. The Packers get back, the Packers offense catches fire, starts to gash the Vikings defense a little bit. Packers get right back into the game, and the Vikings need Sam Darnold and the offense to just do something at this point because the Packers have all the momentum. Things are starting to kind of fall off the rails a little bit, and they just answer with a drive. And I think they only got a field goal out of that drive, but that was huge. It ended up being the difference in the game because the Vikings ended up winning by winning by 2 points that day. We saw it in Chicago just a couple of weeks ago where the Bears, on a crazy kind of fluky way, get 11 points in 22 seconds to tie the game and force overtime. The defense gets a stop, and Sam Darnold and the offense, they just respond. They're not screwing around with the overtime period or anything like that. They get the ball back. They go down the field. Darnold makes some big-time throws, and they kick the field goal and win the game in overtime. We've seen this happen multiple times now where this guy just answers the call and the offense just answers the call. The Arizona game, I mean, I keep going back to that 4th down conversion when they had to have it or the game was over and they lose that game. And he just executes and makes it happen, and they go on to win the game. So we've seen this happen multiple times now. And to me, all it just says is that what we're seeing is real. This is legit. And I'm just excited for how this whole thing is going to play out. It's going to be a lot of fun coming down the stretch here.
So, I mean, the Bears game, the Cardinals game, this was quarterback winning games.
Yes.
It is not, okay, game manage, see if the defense can win it for you, run the football, like maybe hit 1 or 2 shots. This was the quarterback winning these games. And what I remember us saying so many times over the last 6 years before this was you're allowed to overcome something. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to overcome, because what would have happened in the past if a safety came free and sacked the quarterback who couldn't run away? We all would have said, offensive line, blocking. You're allowed to overcome an offensive line performance that wasn't all that good. And it wasn't against Atlanta, and especially in the first half. You're allowed to overcome a defensive performance that wasn't that good. It's not going to be every single game. They've got Bijan Robinson. They've got Drake London. They've got good players too. Yep. And if you're ever going to really win something, you have to have a quarterback who can overcome something. Okay, you score a touchdown, you're feeling great. Then Atlanta flies down the field and scores. You go like, all right, well, go score again. And that's exactly what he did. The response drive was just so enormous for him to just come back to that. And there's so many now stacking up in this season, and that we're seeing when a quarterback has this level of talent and plays the way that Kevin O'Connell wants him to play, that you can overcome a missed field goal, by the way. You can overcome some mistakes, as they had to overcome a fumble or two the last couple of weeks. That's really been the difference. It's the quarterback. And for so many years in the NFL, it's the quarterback. It always is. It's always going to be. How that guy plays will always be the deciding factor of whether you compete for a Super Bowl or not.
The game that I always think about when you look back at the Kirk era, those 6 years, the game when we're talking about this subject of needing a drive, needing a couple of plays that end up being winning plays and the difference in the game. You remember the game in Kansas City in 2019?
Yes, I do. Check down to CJ Ham. Yep.
The Matt Moore game, and the Vikings I think the game was tied late, and the Vikings just need to get downfield, get in position to kick a field goal and win the game. And I think they went 3 and out. And I think that was the check down to CJ Ham. They punt the ball away.
It's a bad punt.
Yeah. It was a bad punt. That's why. Yeah.
Yep.
But Matt Moore, okay, who wasn't even the number 2 quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the 3rd guy. Matt Moore always killed the Vikings for some reason, by the way, even going back to his days with the Panthers. But Matt Moore gets the ball back, and he just makes a couple of throws, just makes a couple of plays. They get in a field goal position, and Harrison Butker kicks the winning field goal, and the Chiefs win the game. That was without the best quarterback on the planet playing in that game. And Matt Moore made a play, and Kirk Cousins couldn't. That kind of talk, that really kind of breaks down what the previous 6 years were about and why it was so frustrating. And to see Sam Darnold do this multiple times in a season is just it's just the biggest difference in the 2 quarterbacks.
Well, and I just couldn't help thinking, and we can move on from this and answer some messages and get to the picks and so forth. How many times we hyped up a game over those years and we said, this is a big one, prove it. This is your moment. And they would just fall flat. There's just so many times over the years. I remember that 2018 game where they went to Chicago and they flexed the game. And maybe that was one of the first years that they could flex games. And they flexed the game. And in the pregame speech, it was, they flexed this game because of us. And then a total no-show. And just how many times was it the disappointment? You know, in the season that they do finish 13-4, they were going to Green Bay, and it's a big game, and it's a prove it. You're kind of coming apart at the seams a little bit, and you almost got beat by Jeff Saturday and required the biggest comeback ever by points. Not the greatest comeback, the biggest comeback. And I mean, you can't top Frank Reich in the playoffs against Warren Moon. So anyway, they go to Green Bay, and there's all this hype. It's like, win this one, you can win the conference and everything else. It's just a no-show. There were so many of those. And for Sam Darnold to show up like he did, it really just made it so obvious that it wasn't just the contract. It wasn't just, well, they paid him too much, they couldn't get corners or whatever. It's like, no, I think there was a little more to it than that.
Wouldn't that game have eliminated the Packers from the playoffs too?
Let's see. That was 22. So I think that's right, because they eventually got eliminated by the Lions
the next week.
Game, on the last game of the season. So Joel says, outside of Darnold, favorite moments were the Jamin Davis sack, Jalen Redmond TFLs, Gabe Murphy, and the defensive tackle making impacts. Future could be bright for the defense. Well, I mean, these guys are going to have to be the present. Gabe Murphy getting in there and playing some snaps. Like, they need guys to rotate. They've played their guys way too much. Like, Van Ginkel is on the injury report for last week. Definitely Jonathan Grenard is worn down. They need somebody to get in there and rotate a little bit with him. Jalen Redmond's just one of those finds. I don't know. It's what makes football great. The guy's in the XFL and just shows up, and all of a sudden he's getting in the backfield. He's to knock it down passes, make it plays. Like, what the heck is going on here? XFL player. But this is another thing about the player evaluation, though. I never had Jalen Redmond making the team out of training camp. I was just like, oh, well, you know, practice squad guy, and we'll see, you know, depth guy or something. And they're like, no, he's on the team. And I think it was out of camp, and everyone went like, oh, really? Okay. This is Brian Flores being able to evaluate players. And that's the way I look at this, is just him and that staff are really good at it. And they're going to need those guys, Manny, because coming out of that game, there's so much about Darnold. There's so much about beating Kirk, 11-2, everything else. But if there is one thing that makes you go, yeah, it is how tired the defense looked late in that game. And that's why that drive was so important, that they were able to go down and make it 28-21, because they really were extremely gassed midway through that game.
I mean, we've talked all year about this, right? About how it's going to be important for, you know, the offense to be able to sustain some longer drives, give the defense a little bit of a break, but also it's going to be important for guys that are not starters to be able to step in and make some things happen. It doesn't mean they have to be world beaters, but they've got to be able to be trusted enough for Brian Flores to put them out there, and they can make something happen. They can be a difference maker in certain situations. So that's going to be huge. And if this team's going to go on a run, they need the number ones on defense to be fresh. They need Jonathan Grenard to be, I mean, Jonathan Grenard, just with how freaking good he's been, if he is not right come playoff time because he's just worn down, that's going to be a huge, huge, huge problem for this defense. So they need someone like him, Andrew Van Ginkel, who's a guy who's a little bit older. He's getting close to 30. Like, they need those guys to be as fresh as possible come playoff time, because, you know, you go on the road, you know, if you don't end up winning this division, you have to go on the road as like a 5 seed, even at like 13-4. You know, you're going to go up against a team that has a pretty good offense, and you're going to need to be able to have a defense that's fresh enough to be able to get some stops. You know, probably going to give up some yards, because that's just kind of been what this defense has been for most of this year, giving up yards. But you've got to have guys that are fresh enough to hold up for the entire way, so that, you know, when you need a stop in a key situation, you'll be able to get it.
I think also the Atlanta Falcons deserve credit for their argument for signing Cousins was, look how much we could put around him. Now they don't have Justin Jefferson, so it's a little different, but the offensive line is good and they do get rid of the ball really quickly. So that could be part of the reason that Grenard Van Ginkel didn't get pressures yesterday, which is very rare for them. But I also think the way the run game played out in the second half, when we've seen teams stay on the field forever, Arizona ran it, the Rams ran it, the Lions ran it. They do have to find a way early in games to put together long drives where they have the football. And they did this a few times. They did this against Indianapolis. They definitely did it a couple times against Chicago. Yesterday was predicated on hitting 40-yard passes or 50-yard passes, which is phenomenal, but you can't rely on that from a quarter-to-quarter basis. And that was one thing I came away with as far as moments from the game. When O'Connell kind of went Kevin Stefanski or Gary Kubiak there and ran and then just ran a play action was the only pass, and they find Oliver for a big gain, I was like, I've seen that done before by some good coaches in the league, but not this coach. Usually he hasn't trusted the run game enough to just run and run and run and run. And I wanted to get in the elevator, go down, walk out to the sideline and say, you can keep doing this. And then go back up to the press box and then go back down and go, and no more freaking trick plays. And then go back up to the press box. Like, but you don't need to, it's just painful. But
enough of the trick plays. Please just stop. They're not necessary. They're not necessary.
Just run the ball.
Just because Dan Campbell is throwing swing passes to his right tackle doesn't mean that you have to do trick plays too. You don't need them. It's fine. You've got two of the best receivers in the league. You've got one of the best tight ends in the league, and your quarterback is kicking ass right now. You don't need any trick plays. It's okay, Kevin.
Why am I envisioning a Josh Oliver game-losing interception in the playoffs? He hand off to Josh Oliver. He throws it up and it's picked off. It's a pick six. Josh Oliver's interception has lost the Vikings the playoffs. Yeah, just run the ball. Like, that's the thing. You can do it. This team can do it. And Dalton Reisner, by the way, was their highest graded run blocker yesterday. So a very motivated, I know I didn't see that coming, but a very motivated Dalton Reisner playing really well at right guard. You can, it's not the best run offensive line, but you can. And you got good running backs. And Cam Akers, every single time the guy plays, he comes up with an explosive run at least once a game. So use him. Keep using him. And maybe that 98-yard drive taught Kevin O'Connell that you don't always have to get 50-yard passes and crazy plays from your quarterback. Jay Garrett says, originally I was out on signing Sam, but I'm beginning to waver. Nothing on JJ McCarthy's college tape indicates he's got Sam's big playability. So here's my thing on this, Manny. One thing that I did take from Kirk Cousins, because I try to personally learn from all the athletes that I cover. These are the greatest in the world. We're making fun of Kirk. We're giving him a hard time and everything. It's one of the great quarterbacks that walks around this earth in a world where a lot of human beings want to be a quarterback, right? And one thing he was so good at is not getting ahead of himself. So he would have a contract year. He'd have criticism. He would have whatever else going on. And he just sort of stayed the course. And he would say, I want to be where my feet are. And with this decision that will happen months from now, I would just say for all Vikings fans, just be where your feet are. And we'll talk about it. It'll come up with guests and they'll get their opinions, and Seifert's going to come on the show and talk about it later this week. We're working out of time for that. But that thing's going to play itself out however it's going to play out. You just won one of the coolest games you've had in 10 years? Since Favre. How many games like that? Kirk had the one in 19 where they blew out Philadelphia that was pretty incredible. But I mean, there's not that many games like that you're going to have. Be where your feet are for now. And then we'll figure all that out when we get there. Like, you don't have to stress about this now. You'll have whatever offseason. After they win the Super Bowl in February, then you can decide.
Just enjoy. It's the old Mike Tyson quote. Just enjoy the season. This season is so much fun. I'm having so much on a personal note. I'm having so much fun watching this team, watching Sam Darnold play well, watching Justin Jefferson be the best receiver on the planet, watching Jordan Addison emerge into a star. TJ Hawkinson is back and he's contributing, and the defense has been fun to watch. Just enjoy this. We don't need to stress about how much money Sam Darnold's going to get in the offseason. Well, should they keep him? Should they franchise him? Should they, sign him to a long-term deal and trade J.J. McCarthy? Like, we don't need to talk about that right now. There's still 4 regular season games left. Let's just enjoy this, guys. It's okay to enjoy this. We don't have to think about 2025 right now. It's fine. Just have fun. Enjoy this. It's great.
And yesterday, and again, it's not going to disappear from the show. It's impossible. It's like a huge franchise decision. So it's not something that I'm saying it more from what I think the perspective of Vikings fans. If you're going to Monday Night Football against Chicago, or you're looking forward to that game, and you don't have to spend every quarter thinking about, are they going to extend him? Are they going to keep him? Are they going to go to McCarthy and all this sort of stuff? Because you can do that another time. And so every discussion about Darnold's play doesn't have to be a referendum on what's going to happen in the future. And the reality is, and I'm going to keep on this train, that his high level play is so high level that you can only compare it to the best quarterbacks in the league right now. And if that's how this ends up playing out, and it's much closer to the real thing than a Case Keenum that was random because of the physical talent, because of the draft status, because of the circumstances not changing into the future, you don't have to choose one over the other. I'll just keep saying that every time this comes up, it's like, whoa, it's Sam versus McCarthy. It's not, because you can franchise tag Sam Darnold and then go from there. It doesn't have to be his college tape or something. J.J. McCarthy was tremendous in training camp. He sold everybody in the organization on him being the franchise guy. It's just that sometimes things change with quarterbacks. How MFing unpredictable are quarterbacks? Bryce Young looked like the worst player on planet Earth 8 weeks ago. And now everybody's talking about how good he looks and how close these games have been and how he's had a chance to win. He gets one guy to catch a ball yesterday, and maybe they're upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles. Sam Darnold, no, people didn't see this coming. So that's always going to live in the back of your mind that this wasn't the plan. But do you think the San Francisco 49ers thought Brock Purdy was going to be the dude? Sometimes it just works out that way. And if you're one of those franchises, how about the Eagles? They probably thought Carson Wentz is our guy. It's going to be our franchise for 10 years. And then he wasn't. And somebody else comes in and goes to the Super Bowl. I don't know. You can't predict any of this.
Do we remember when the St. Louis Rams gave Trent Green this massive contract and then he gets hurt in preseason? I think it was Rodney Harrison that kind of rolled into his knee, and Trent Green tears his ACL and he's done for the season. And Dick Vermeil goes in the post game afterwards and he's in tears and he says, we're going to rally around Kurt Warner and we'll play good football. Nobody thought Kurt Warner was going to suddenly step in and be the MVP of the league and then throw for 400 yards and win the Super Bowl MVP. And then it regardless of what they gave Trent Green, Kurt Warner became the guy there for the next couple of years, won another MVP, got to another Super Bowl. I mean, it's, to your point, it's so hard to predict these things. Teams can always sort of map out this plan and have a plan in place. But when something changes and a guy steps in and he plays really well, you just have to kind of live in that moment and see how things play out. And then you kind of make that decision going forward. And I think that's the situation that the Vikings are in right now. I mean, sure, I'm sure Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's got it in the back of his mind. All right, well, if Sam keeps up this level of play and we get to the Super Bowl, we have to think about giving this guy a 5 or 6 year contract and just having him be our guy going forward. And then we'll figure out something with J.J. McCarthy after that. But if you're Kevin O'Connell and you're Sam Darnold and you're the Vikings players, and honestly, if you're a Vikings fan right now, you got to worry about the Chicago Bears on Monday.
Right.
That's all they can focus on right now. And I'm imploring for fans, guys, let's just have some fun finding a way to beat the Chicago Bears. Let's just focus on that and focus on how this season is going to finish up with Sam Darnold playing as well as he is.
I also want to make a point, and it's an important one, that the Kirk Cousins contract discussion, people got beat over the head with it over the years, to the point where it went too far, to the point where it reached, you can never and should never pay a quarterback. And I just want to point something out about the National Football Conference and the standings. The Philadelphia Eagles are 11-2. Their quarterback got paid. The Seattle Seahawks are leading their division at 8-5. They pay Geno Smith. The Rams, they're right in that mix. Good team when everybody's healthy. They have a quarterback on an expensive contract. The Detroit Lions, and they did when they brought Matt Stafford over. He was on an expensive contract when they won the Super Bowl. The Detroit Lions paid Jared Goff. They are number one in the conference. The Green Bay Packers paid Jordan Love. They're 9-4. They're right in the mix with everybody else. The Bucks, they lead their division at 7-6. All of the best teams in the NFC outside of the Commanders have paid their quarterbacks, and the Cardinals aren't that far behind. They're 6-7, and they paid their quarterback too, and they're kind of a rising team that could eventually be good. My point is that in short windows with quarterbacks who are surrounded with the right things, who can make plays and have big arms and can create explosives on their own and lead the NFL in big time throws, you can pay someone and it doesn't ruin your franchise if you manage it properly. And I just want to make that point, that it's sort of one of those, like, it became said over and over and over that it became truth for everything and anything always. And Goff had a big contract when he got there to Detroit, and they worked around it. So it doesn't have to be this terrifying thing. If you're going to play at this level, which is a top 5 to 7 quarterback in the league, then that's worth working out a contract for. And then you sort of deal with the rest. But the fact that they've got the franchise tag in their pocket, to me, has always meant if they decide that they want to keep him for another year and see what happens and create a bigger sample size, they can do it. And it may be so much less controversial than we think it's going to be. Brady says, am I wrong here, or did Sam not have any old Sam brain fart moments? He had 0 turnover-worthy plays in the game yesterday, which is really remarkable. Also, these last 4 weeks have dropped him out of the top of the league in turnover-worthy plays to still in the mid upper tier. But for someone who throws down the field as much as he does, he's right there with a lot of the other star quarterbacks in the league. How many even old Sam moments have there even been this year? He's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the entire NFL for this season. I mean, that has to play into it too. It's not just the big moments and the exciting stuff. It really has been consistency for him.
Yeah, I mean, the only time you can think about is maybe the Jacksonville game, but most quarterbacks in the league are going to have a game like that once, maybe twice a year. Like, the really good ones are going to have a bad game. Like, it just happens. Patrick Mahomes, the best guy on the planet, has those games occasionally. Very rarely he throws 3 interceptions in a game, but Patrick Mahomes will have games like that where he just doesn't play well. The first half of the season, his numbers were terrible. And the Chiefs were still winning games. So it's easy to kind of ignore that stuff. But, for the most part, I mean, Sam has been really, really good. What was the stat you had that he's had 100+ quarterback rating in 10 of the 13 games or 11 of the 13 games? That's insanity. That's insane. But it goes to show you how well and how consistent he's been, save for, what is it, the Jacksonville game, and then I think the Jets game was the other one where he was under 100. That's ridiculous. And so, I mean, I'm impressed, man. I thought when they signed him, I thought that there was high potential for him to play well and have a nice, productive season. But even I have to admit, I didn't see this. I didn't see this level of play from him. He's been outstanding. He's been just absolutely fantastic all year.
The only guy that did was the guy, Andrew, in the comments that wanted to bet anyone $1,000 that Darnold could be a top 10 quarterback. And I did not take that bet because my logic was, I've seen this movie before. Jeff George shows up and goes crazy. There's no way I'm betting you on that. And well, it's been right so far. And there's still almost a quarter of the season left to go. And we'll get to that in a minute, but there's just a lot of good questions and comments. Ron says their best 6-win season ever. Great job, Ron, on that. The snark. How about this from Alex? When can we start talking about the best and worst matchups in the playoffs for the Vikings? Well, now is fine. So the weird thing about this situation is they could still win the conference, and everybody is getting behind my old city for next week when the Bills play the Detroit Lions. It's still on the table. I mean, the Vikings could beat the Bears. They could beat the Seattle Seahawks. I just booked my travel for that, by the way. I wasn't originally going to go to Seattle, but we're going. I mean, I'm not missing anything from now. So we're good there. But as far as best and worst, so the way I would rank this, Manny, is I think the best matchup for them would be to play the Atlanta Falcons again in Atlanta to start in the playoffs, because gestures at everything from yesterday. The Bucks, I think they're a little bit scary because Baker Mayfield could get hot and their defense has some serious playmakers. They're a pretty legit team, the Bucks, and having to go to their place, that's where Philadelphia petered out last year. As far as playing in the West, the Rams would be at the top of the list of teams you just don't want to play. When they've had Puka Nacua in there and Cooper Kupp, they're just a pretty dangerous team, and they put up 40 points on a great Bills defense yesterday. So if I'm ranking the possibilities, everybody in the NFC West is possible, and the Bucks and Falcons are possible for the first game. And then it changes if the Vikings were to win the conference. But just assuming they're going to sit in that 5 seed, I would say you'd want to play Atlanta first. Probably, I mean, the Cardinals could still win that division, but probably the Bucks are second, and then the Seahawks, and then the Rams. Sorry if that's a little convoluted, but that would kind of be my order. You'd want to play Atlanta, then you'd want to play Tampa, then you'd want to play Seattle, then least want to play the Rams. That's how I would have the order.
Yeah, Atlanta's definitely number one on my list of teams that I would want to see them get matched up with, just because I think it's a really good matchup that favors the Vikings. That defense, the Vikings can move the ball on that defense, obviously, as they showed yesterday, almost flawlessly. Yeah, Tampa's an interesting team too, because like you said, Baker could get hot. It could also be just kind of nasty and sloppy weather-wise down there. It could be kind of a rainy, muddy type of environment, which I don't know would really favor the Vikings very well. Their defense, you mentioned the playmakers they have. Obviously, one of my favorite players in the league, kind of biased, but Antoine Winfield Jr. is fantastic, an all-pro caliber player. Vita Vea is just 360. I mean, if you're telling me Vita Vea is going to go up against the Minnesota Vikings offensive line, I'm thinking Akeem Hicks just right away. Just big 260-pound interior defensive lineman that just wreaks havoc. That could be kind of a problematic situation for them too. So I give me Atlanta, and then everybody else. I think Seattle. How I feel about a matchup with Seattle, I think will depend on what I see when they go there in a couple of weeks. That'll kind of tell me, because Seattle's just one of those teams that they're playing better the last couple of weeks. They've kind of taken control of that division a little bit, a game up on the Rams. I still kind of want to see a little bit more of them to figure out like how good they actually are. But yeah, and the Rams are, I don't think the Rams are a very good matchup for the Vikings, just with their defensive front. And, they have a veteran quarterback with weapons and a great coach as well. So everybody else after that, though, I would say sign me up. San Francisco even doesn't worry me right now, because if they find a way to get in, they're just really, really banged up right now.
The Geno thing versus Stafford is the difference maker for me. I think Seattle might be a little bit more of a complete team than the Rams. They're both flawed, but I'd just rather face Geno Smith than Matthew Stafford in a playoff game. Just period. Digits says time of possession imbalance and offensive line struggles will present real challenges against good teams. The first part of that is extremely real. The second part of it is just you watch the Vikings. They have Now, they had struggles against the Falcons and at times against the Arizona Cardinals. But on the whole, this offensive line has been terrific. It's been the best offensive line that I have covered since I got here in 2016. I don't even think it's close. Cam Robinson's done a great job for them. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the other team's going to create pressure. And one of the things Darnold's doing a good job of is take a sack if you have to, but don't lose the football, right? And he has not been giving up the football on some of those sacks. The offensive line is look what they did. They needed a big drive at the end of that game. They get the ball at the 2-yard line after the interception, and the offensive line is pushing bodies, and they're running and running and running and running. And in the second half, Darnold had time to throw the football. I just think that around the league, defensive players are so skilled and so talented, and defensive minds are so good. You're going to get beat sometimes. But every time you get beat, one, you can still throw a 52-yard touchdown, as Darnold did. But every time you get beat, every fan of every team is going to be like, our offensive line is not good enough. But this offensive line is good enough to play against good teams in the playoffs. It's not like the Dakota Dozier, the Tom Compton. It's pretty solid. But, if your quarterback needs 5 offensive linemen that are all pros, you're never going to have that in the NFL. What you got is good enough to look at these numbers for the last couple of weeks. How could we look at the line and be like, I don't know. They went for 100 yards rushing against Chicago and threw for 300 there. And then, 2 weeks later here, we're putting up an all-time game and we're going, I don't know about this guard. I think that's just a mechanism of having watched this team struggle with the O-line for a really long time. But the time of possession issue is very real, Manny. And I think they do need to resolve or have an answer for that if they're going to win and go deep into the playoffs, because you can't play 4 playoff games while having 53 plays and the other team has 75.
Yeah, that's going to be sort of the number one thing I'm looking at now over these last 4 games is just how they sort of manage, possession time. Can Kevin O'Connell get kind of creative with some of the play calling to kind of keep things simpler a little bit? You could still look for the big plays, the deep shots down the field, the 30-yard completions and all of that. But, the shorter, sort of easier, more sort of routine throws for Sam Darnold to make. The screen game, I still think there's a chance for the screen game to be effective. Mix it up a little bit more. Not every play has to be a 50-yard bomb. Those are great when they happen and they work. But, if you can kind of mix in, especially in certain situations where okay, my defense was just on the field for 15 plays and the opposing team just scored a touchdown and took 7 minutes off the clock. Let's understand what the situation is. Let's realize we really cannot afford to have a 3-and-out right now. Let's play complementary football. Let's try to keep the chains moving here a little bit, give our defense a break, and kind of maintain some possession here going forward. And I think, when we talk about just the guys on the defense that have gotten worn down, that's been a big part of it, is because they're on the field for so many plays. Those guys just get tired, especially some of the older players, the older veterans on the defensive side. So if you just can kind of sustain more longer, 10, 11, 12 play drives, I think it'll bode well for really the entire team.
All right, let me answer 2 real quickly here. Matt says Eagles, Packers, and Lions have a lot more 2-score wins. Just for you, Matt, I looked that up. Not the case, my friend. Not the case. Philadelphia Eagles have 4 2-score wins. The Minnesota Vikings have 4 2-score wins. Everybody in the league is playing close games, my man. The Minnesota Vikings, the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions barely escaped against Chicago, who is a tire fire. I don't know. That happened to you too, because they play in the league also. And that's how it goes sometimes.
The 2 defending Super Bowl champions seemingly are playing they played another one last night, another close 1-possession game that comes down to, needing to make a field goal at the end, needing to block a field goal at the end, needing an interception or whatever needing one big throw. That's just kind of this league. I thought that's why we loved this league, because these teams, there's a lot more parity, and these teams play a lot of close games, and these games are exciting. Isn't that why we love this stuff?
This is what Roger wanted for us. I just looked it up. The Packers have four 2-score wins. So look, I look at point differential. You guys know I've said it for years. Plus 100 is important. It is a baseline for being a Super Bowl contender. If you look at the last 20 teams to reach the Super Bowl, 16 of them have been plus 100 at least. The Minnesota Vikings today are plus 99. If they finish plus 100 or relatively close to that, that's the baseline for me. If you go into the playoffs with at least 12 wins, which they very well could get to soon, and then plus 100, you have as good a chance as anybody else going to the playoffs has ever had. And the road could be harder because of the Lions, which was the last question before I want to pick the schedule here with you. Jeffrey says 4 games to go. What's the realistic chance you get to the number 1 seed if Detroit falters and the Eagles get the number 1? Well, or I guess maybe that's 2 questions, but the realistic chance is not that high. It really isn't. I mean, I think it's going to be tough for the Vikings to keep winning at the same pace. It feels like they're going to just have to win every game. But if the Lions go to Buffalo and lose, definitely a place you could go and lose, and the Vikings win on Monday Night Football, then that Week 18 game could ultimately end up being for the entire conference. And I don't know, the Eagles keep playing close games as well. So I don't know. I mean, it's not the greatest chance, but maybe 1 out of 4. It's possible the way that the Vikings are playing, but it feels like they're going to maybe hit a bump in the road at some point here, which means we need to pick this schedule. I had promised it a half an hour into the show, and then we just, a lot of great questions and comments today. So, Manny, the Vikings are going to play the Bears on Monday Night Football, December 16th at US Bank Stadium, to go potentially 12-2. Do they reach 12-2? Do they beat the Chicago Bears next week?
I think yesterday kind of told me a lot about where the Chicago Bears are at. I thought maybe with, Thomas Brown taking over as interim head coach, that maybe they get a little bit of a jolt going up against a banged up 49ers team. Maybe the Bears can find a way to sneak out a victory. They're coming off a longer week, having, had the sort of the longer sort of half bye type of thing after playing on Thanksgiving. Yeah, they no-showed. That's pretty bad. The Bears are not good, and there's talent. The young quarterback is obviously very gifted. He's got weapons. They got some players on defense, but there's just they're just not in a good way right now. It just doesn't feel like a unit that is together right now, even after firing their coach, which you would think in some cases would unite a team. I think the Vikings take care of business. It could be kind of a closer game because of the Bears are still a talented team, and some crazy things could happen. But I think the Vikings being at home, playing with a lot of confidence after yesterday's game, that extra day I think will help, rest some bodies a little bit on the defensive side, especially, and the Vikings take care of business and get a win.
Division games always closer. The one thing, though, was Matt Eberflus always kind of gave some problems to Kevin O'Connell. Not that he was a good coach, not that he didn't deserve it, but he just always, with his defense, there was a handful of plays per game where it seemed like he would mix up coverages or get pressures or whatever, stop the run. They fired him. So I don't know if they're going to be able to still do that. And certainly this guy trying to be a head coach and call plays, he must be calling the plays and being a head coach. Really hard thing to do. I think, they're in a very tough spot. Probably some of the worst vibes in the entire NFL. Then they go out to Seattle. A game that so every year I put in my list to Vikings PR of the games I'm going to travel to. And this one against Seattle, I initially left off the list because I kind of thought, maybe they'll be out of it by then. I don't really know. I guess we'll see, but I'm not sure that one's the juice worth the squeeze. Well, today I sent them a message and said, put me on the list. I'm headed to Seattle December 22nd because every game is worth it at this point. So you people better subscribe because it's not cheap to fly to Seattle. So subscribe. Anyway, 12-2 headed out to Seattle. Do they win that football game?
I've been pretty consistent with this, of calling this a loss the last several weeks for actually most of the season, just because I've always kind of felt like Seattle was a tough place to play. Although the Seahawks this year have actually been a better road team than they have. I think they're only like 3-4 at home this year, 5-1 on the road. So they've been a better team away from that field. But I think they're playing better. They're in first place in that division. I think they kind of realize they have a chance to maybe grab a stranglehold of this division, depending on what happens with the Rams, who are kind of right behind them. But if Seattle can beat the Vikings and go to, I guess they would be, I don't know who they're playing next week, but if that is potentially them trying to get like a 10th win, let's say, that's a big opportunity for them. And I think they'll show up ready to play. So I'll put that down as a Seattle win, dropping the Vikings to 12-3.
What if Seattle's home field advantage was just the friends we made along the way? Like, what if it was just Marshawn Lynch and like their defense and Russell Wilson?
Right.
Maybe it was. But this one does make sense for them to kind of run out of gas against a team that's playing desperately for that spot in the NFC West. Fair enough. So 12-3. Then the game of the year, Packers, December 29th, US Bank Stadium, whatever it was in there yesterday. It's going to be more for that one. People ask me all the time if games are getting flexed. I'm going to tell you the truth. I have no idea. I find out when you do. Could they flex that one? Are they going to flex that? I don't know. I don't know. They don't send me an email first. It's not like they come up to me and whisper flexed in my, I don't know. We'll see. But this game deserves flexed. But I don't know if it's going to be. So let's just assume it'll be a very exciting noon game for everybody for a 12-3 football team facing the Packers. Is that a win or a loss, man?
I've been pretty consistent with this one as well, calling this a win for the Vikings at home and sweeping the season series with Green Bay. The Packers are talented and Jordan Love is really good and they're well coached. It just kind of seems like with them sometimes when they've got an opportunity to get like that big win, they don't quite do it. They had a chance to beat the Lions this past week, and that was a big opportunity for them, and they just couldn't get it done. They were right there, and they just couldn't do enough, and that's a Lions team that's kind of reeling right now with all the injuries they have on defense. So they're going to have an opportunity to really kind of make a statement game again going into US Bank Stadium. And it just feels like they're just going to come up a bit short. I think it's going to be a great game, highly tight, close, competitive, maybe even high scoring, much like the game in Green Bay was. But I think the Vikings will have enough and come out on top.
13-3. They win that game, and Vikings fans will be all in. Lions, let's assume it matters. I don't know if it will, the way that we're playing out. We'd have to also pick the Lions and every other NFC team schedule to see, or maybe we just have to pick the Lions. I don't know. But if they're 13-3 going to Detroit with the game mattering, do you think that they could pull off a win in Detroit? Let me throw something funny at you. I was thinking about how the old cliche is it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Like, do you want to lose this game because it's hard to beat a team 3 times?
In case you play them in the playoffs.
Right. Obviously, the answer is no. But I thought about how that cliche always, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Like, is it? I don't know. How often does that even come up? So do they win this one or not?
Wasn't too hard for the 99 Titans against the Jaguars. Probably a sore subject for the current Vikings wide receivers coach.
But also, of course, you would say that.
Yeah, of course I would. Kind of has me thinking about it now a little bit, just because I don't know, man. Detroit has been kind of just, I don't want to say playing with fire, but they've been getting by, which could mean a couple of things. It could mean that somebody's going to get them in the playoffs, or it could mean that they have all the intangibles needed to win a championship and go all the way to the Super Bowl and win it. So there's a couple different ways you could play that. I'll call it a Lions win, and the Lions secure that number 1 seed, and the Vikings will have to settle with the number 5 seed at 13-4.
Think about this. So that would just be a 2-2 ending to the season, which I think is reasonable. And talk about playing with fire. The Vikings have at times also recently in recent weeks. So someone's going to beat them over the rest of this season. But that would mean 2 of the first 3 seasons of Kevin O'Connell's head coach, he finishes with 13 wins. And think about this too. If they even finish 2-2, what is Kevin O'Connell's record when his starting quarterback plays? So not Dobbs, not Mullins, Jaron Hall. That was not a memorable night. Nope. But what is his so last year 4-4, 13-4 the year before, so that would be 17-8. That'd be 30-12.
What is that percentage?
And they've run the worst trick plays.
What is that percentage? It's
30 out of 42.
30. Wait a minute. 30. Okay. That's a 7-14 win percentage.
Man, that's if they go 2-2 the rest of the way. 71% of games. But he can't call plays apparently. So it's amazing. He's overcome this inability to call plays.
We talked about this a few weeks ago, but how's the rest of that coaching hiring cycle?
I know
from 2022 looking right now.
Yeah. Oh, Nate Hackett's doing great in New York. Yeah. Good job over there, man. How about, can we just stop real quick? Just stop right now before you leave, because we're getting close to, I mean, we've got most of the answers right now. Can we just talk for a second? Maybe we could do more of this on Thursday about how everything is played out in the NFL this season. Like what, because the Vikings are the most unexpected. You never saw it coming. Just off the dome. I'll give you a second. I'll yammer one. Give you a second to think about this. The biggest things for you where teams results where we're at, where you're like, man, can't believe it. Or I freaking told you so. The biggest I freaking told you so is probably the Atlanta Falcons. But the second one has to be the Jets. Oh, really? You're going to bring in a broken Aaron Rodgers who's been drinking strange teas and living in trees and going to Egypt rather than practicing, and I'm sure it'll be fine. You just hand your organization over to a complete sociopath, and it'll be great. He'll just drop back and wing it just like it was 2010 again, babe. Are you serious? The guy looks about 20 or 30 pounds lighter than he did when he was at his best. He wants to play an offense that was at its best 10, 12 years ago. He manipulates everybody around him. He's convinced the owner that he deserves to be coach, GM, trainer, whatever else, right? And they won 3 games. It's not even enough. Like, they were much better with Zach Wilson. It's not even like what? Yeah. It is not even enough. Not even enough to say you got exactly what you deserved. Yeah. Exactly what you deserved.
Think about what they have too, in terms of the talent on the offensive side. The receivers, Garrett Wilson, good.
They traded for Devontae Adams.
You traded for Devontae Adams, one of the great wide receivers of this last decade. I mean, they gave Allen Lazard a pretty good chunk of change too, which was probably kind of dumb. But and now they're sitting there at 3-10. They've blown out the head coach. They ran the GM out of town. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was Robert Saleh's fault. Yeah, they have a worse winning percentage since they fired Robert Saleh than they did before they fired him. Then they ran Joe Douglas out of town, which how often does a GM get fired mid-season?
I know,
we never see that. You know what I mean? So now it's all on you, Aaron. You're 3-10. How are you feeling?
3-10.
And there was talk of like and I don't know how serious people were being, but there was like talk of like maybe bringing him here next
Oh,
year.
no, no,
It's
no.
like,
Yeah,
no, no, absolutely
yeah.
not. He's going to be 41. Do you really want, with everything that's happened with the Jets for the last
That
couple of
was no
years,
way that was ever
the,
even remotely serious. Yeah.
the everything that we've seen, just the way things ended in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers has been a clown show for the last 3 seasons.
Yep.
Why would anyone want anything to do with that after this season?
Couldn't happen to a worse guy. So, anyway, well, I'm sure his family has enjoyed the season, but what's the biggest surprise for you? That's my biggest, like I told you so. What's the biggest surprise for you?
Um, it's well, I was thinking about I was kind of hoping we would see a bounce back year from Jacksonville
Oh,
this
yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And
Brutal.
that's been kind of just with how bad it's gotten. I think, I thought maybe things could get kind of bad just because of the way things finished last year, but I didn't think it was going to be this. Now I know they won yesterday, but I didn't think it was going to be like so bad where they go in Detroit and they're getting beat by, 40 points or whatever. And I'm still surprised that Doug Peterson still has a job, but the way things have just really fallen apart for them. And the thing with them too, this seems to happen often. And I don't know if it has anything to do with ownership or what, but like we've seen them kind of have these pop-up years where they're good.
Mhm.
And then things just kind of, we saw it with Doug Marrone too. They go to the AFC title game and then they just fall apart after that. They can't sustain what they're doing. They have a great playoff win a couple of years ago with Trevor
Mhm.
Lawrence, a come from behind win against the Chargers. And they're looking pretty good the first 10 or so games last year, and then they just fall apart. And they've been a disaster this year. So I think that's kind of my surprise, is just not that they were not a playoff team, but just how bad it's actually gotten for them again this year. Is really unreal.
I'll give you mine. I don't want to talk about it. I thought the Cowboys would be really good this year. I don't know. Sorry. I thought they would be. I thought Zimmer would turn around that defense or get them
Yeah,
playing at a
I
really
did
high
too.
level. Did not expect Micah Parsons to miss a huge part of the season, and also Deron Bland and also Trayvon Diggs. So that's probably been why. But they completely failed to launch this year and petered out, and they still kind of compete, but they're just not a good team. And Philadelphia, I thought Philadelphia with Nick Sirianni was going to go in a bad way. They
I
didn't.
did too.
Thought that Washington would need another year.
Yeah.
So
I thought the Eagles would be a train wreck this year,
yeah,
honestly. Even after getting Saquon, which was turned out to be maybe the free agency signing of the offseason for the entire league. But
except
I
Sam
thought
Darnold.
that's right. Yeah, Sam Darnold. Yeah, that's right. Good catch. But yeah, I thought with just all the drama and the way things ended last year, and then like the locker room guys, the Jason Kelce's and the Fletcher Coxes just retire. The guys that you thought were like the glue of that locker room, with those guys going away, I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be like 8-9, 9-8
Mhm.
Philadelphia Eagles, and Sirianni would get fired. But they look fantastic right now.
Still feels fragile to me. That locker room and that team still feels fragile. With I don't know if you saw it, but Brandon Graham talking about how there's no relationship between AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. It feels like still a little bit tenuous there. So anyway, a lot of drama still to come. Manny, thank you for your time. Thursday night, it's usually more of a hardcore preview where we dive in, but we'll have to figure out, because you did your favorite Vikings and Bears game. We'll figure out a Bears angle that'll be fun for Thursday night, and we'll have turned the page on this and start getting ready for Monday night. But we'll have some fun then. So thank you for your time, sir. And we'll catch you
got it.
Thursday.
Football. See you guys.
All right. I still have some time to answer questions, so I'm going to scroll back in the comments and answer your questions that you've been throwing out there, questions and comments during our discussion. But first, I want to mention that Manny and I did a pretty darn good job last week with our higher and lowers on Underdog Fantasy. We went higher on Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson, and Bijan Robinson in their totals, and bang, 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 hit on each one of those in a shootout game. So if you want to play along over at Underdog Fantasy, you can play along with the pick'ems. There's also plenty of fantasy games for all sports. Easiest app to use and a great sponsor, of course, of this show. So we always appreciate that. And a way to support the show, sign up over at Underdog Fantasy for the stretch run of the football season by signing up with the code PURPLE to claim your special pick. First time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Okay. Digit says veteran quarterbacks with high IQ will pick apart and wear out the defense. Can we outscore very good defenses in these instances? It's how many very good defenses will they be playing would be my question. Veteran quarterback like Baker Mayfield, and they've got a running game now and good weapons. But when it comes to their defense, it's just okay. Like, is there any team that they're going to play that has a defense where you would say, oh man, the Vikings can't possibly outscore them? Phillies is pretty good. The Lions is really banged up. It was good earlier this year. The Packers have their moments. They also have their down moments. There isn't a team they're going to play that has a dominant defense. The most concerned I would be is about, honestly, the Rams, because their D-line is so good and can get after the quarterback the way that they did against the Vikings and slow down the run game. But there aren't that many teams that are great on defense. They're not all the Falcons who have a really terrible defense. What you're saying, though, it is a concern about how opposing quarterbacks have been able to continually find those receivers in the middle of the zones and deal with the blitzes. And Kirk Cousins did it on several instances yesterday where he was able to drop back and find people open over the middle, get the ball into the hands of his weapons, taking a snap, getting rid of the ball quickly into the playmaker's hands, running the football, which they did when they wore him down. This is the biggest question mark I have about the Vikings defense, is if they face Goff in the playoffs, even Baker Mayfield, if it's him. Jordan Love gets a little antsy. I don't know if he is able to be that patient, but Jalen Hurts, their running game, how is that going to match up? Realistically, what they need is to be able to have quarterback play like they've gotten the last 4 weeks where, yeah, you're going to get sometimes where the other team scores and they move the ball, and it's not always going to be what it looked like against the Texans earlier this year. But when you get your opportunities, you have to put up points, you have to hit on explosives. And I think that they also just have to learn to control the football a little longer early in the game. The opening script so often seems like, let's whip down the field and score as fast as possible, which is great, and you want to get ahead. But sometimes it seems to get away from possessing the football as it goes along. And they did it for a few weeks, but maybe just because the opportunities were there against the Falcons, that's why they went for the big plays. The first half of Arizona, it seemed like they were big play hunting a little too much, and they then got into possession in the second half. I think they need to do that a little bit more often earlier in the game. Is the faithful. I'm amazed the amount of disrespectful commentary by some of the national media today. Heard one show analyst said the Vikings got lucky on Sunday and Darnold wasn't anything to worry about. Yeah, I mean, I think that what analysts are saying on national TV shows probably isn't much to worry about here. It is something that people have asked me a lot, though, like friends of mine in the league or not in the league. Just why aren't the Vikings talked about more in the national conversation? Well, one is Philadelphia moves the needle. People love to talk about Dan Campbell. They love to yell about Dan Campbell. Put two dudes in a room and have them yell at each other about Dan Campbell going on for fourth down. That's going to get ratings, or that's going to get clips that go viral on social media because everybody seems to have an argument about Dan Campbell and his fourth downs. You just got angry as I was talking about it. I guarantee it. You thought I have an opinion on that. And that's what a lot of those shows are geared toward. They're not geared toward the most rational and reasonable analysis that you can have with lots of nuance and a 2-hour discussion about the Minnesota Vikings. They are set up to be debate topics that people will respond to on social media and come back for more the next day for more arguing. That's really what they're designed. And the Vikings are just not a team to have much argument about. Now they have the, should they sign Sam Darnold? Like they can yell about that. I saw Shannon Sharp yelling about that today. But I mean, they're not built to have the discussions that we're having. It's just a different medium. They're doing what they need to do business wise, but it's a different medium. So when you watch it as a rational person who has watched this whole season play out and you know everything about this team, you people know who Jalen Redmond is. You have a lot more knowledge of the Vikings, you watching this show, than they do on the national shows. Just because somebody played in the league or was a national reporter or they just hired them off the internet because they were popular or whatever, that doesn't mean they actually know more than you about your team, because you watch every play of every game and you read and you research and you watch the game back and you follow all the reporters. They can't do that for 32 teams. They're looking for debate topics. And so the Vikings have been so uncontroversial that there's nothing to talk about here. And it's also not considered one of the biggest markets. It actually is a pretty big market, but it's not New York. It's not Philly. It's not LA. It's not Chicago. So it doesn't have that same type of, like, it's going to get this huge audience just because of how you're talking about it. But I don't worry about that. You probably shouldn't either. I think it's more telling that they're not talking about this team. It tells you that they don't have anything that's on fire. They don't have anything that's burning to the ground, because that's what it usually takes to get the attention of the TV shows, is to be firing your coach, having your wide receiver go on the internet and say something or do something, to have your coach be doing controversial things or saying crazy stuff at the podium. You just don't have any of that. You just have a really good football team that's plus 99, is 11-2, and is right in the conversation to go into the playoffs and really compete. So, but as far as yesterday, anybody who says that was lucky or whatever else, I guess you could say that the Falcons corners falling down was probably a good break for them and they took advantage of it. But the way that Sam Darnold operated, the way the offense, is it lucky that Justin Jefferson gets 132 yards? I don't think so. He does that all the time. So I don't know. I have felt this year more than any other year that the national conversation has just shifted so much to what teams in big markets are failing, that they've missed out on a lot of good conversation about a lot of teams. It's not just yours. It's not just the Vikings. It's just so much on something is on fire. We need to be talking about the Chicago Bears constantly because it's the big market and they're struggling, and call for the coaches to be fired. That's just how those shows work. And that's their business model. So it's not the business model of Purple Insider. The business model of Purple Insider is to talk about Jalen Redmond making the football team and Gabriel Murphy. and remember last week when I read you all the Sam Darnold statistics and the statistical analysis. That's what the show is, and to have fun chatting with you guys. So we do our thing. They do their thing. To quote Sam Darnold, it is what it is. Ron says Dallas Turner showed a lot of potential on Sunday. I thought he was okay. I got to go back and watch it. As far as his PFF grade, it was above average, or just a shade above average. He had the one very notable pressure where he whipped into the backfield and made a play. He rushed the passer only about 16 times, dropped back in coverage 7, I think. He was out there a good amount, but with Dallas Turner, they're very clearly developing him in a certain type of vision. And yesterday, he was a part of a handful of plays, was flying around on some other plays. You could see the talent. It's just going to take some time. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here down the stretch with Patrick Jones banged up, because now he's got to play a Patrick Jones type of role, which is sometimes rushing from different spots, sometimes dropping back in coverage. That one's just going to take time, and we're not really going to know where he's at until he's got more opportunity. He's getting plays. He's out there on the field. He's just not getting a ton of opportunities necessarily to rush the passer. I see him in coverage a lot. They run the football. He's in on that. It's just the development that's going to have to happen for Dallas Turner, but they may need him. They very well may need him. So I think we'll get a good sense, because when they've used him more, he's been pretty good. He was pretty good yesterday. He was, I thought, very good against the Indianapolis Colts. So we're going to see more and more. and maybe by the end of the season, start to get a sense for what he really is going to be or what his upside can be going forward and things like that. That's going to show itself as we go forward. How are they going to use him down the stretch will be something that I'm definitely going to watch. Wade says, my only complaint yesterday was Kirk not throwing a check down on 4th against us. Wanted it so badly. He did fail on a 4th down by overthrowing somebody. And that was reminiscent of some Kevin O'Connell 4th down pass calls on 4th and short where they incompleted passes. But yep, there was a lot of typical moments. Real men something says our offensive line and our defense are my biggest concern right now. Defense giving up a ton of yards, O-line giving up a ton of pressure. It truly is not a ton of pressure. It just feels like it because you're watching your favorite team. When you look at the statistics from yesterday, and this is why I love stats so much, because they can confirm or deny something that happened. He was pressured on 13 dropbacks, which is like 35% or something like that of his dropbacks. It's a relatively normal number for pressure rate. It's just that he got sacked on a couple of them, and then he had to escape on another one. But aside from those, there were a lot of clean dropbacks where he was able to operate from the pocket. I want to get this through. The offensive line is actually one of the better lines in the league overall. This is not by my secret opinion or metrics that I'm keeping on some notebook. This is by the PFF metrics, which I trust when it comes to offensive line play to tell us the real story. And also by my eye. I've seen the worst. It's not like this. I mean, even for somebody like Dalton Reisner getting pushed back a little as he does, but he's still giving enough of a pocket for Sam Darnold to throw the ball. So the defensive side of it getting worn down, what are they going to look like going into the playoffs? That's why some of these guys are getting good reps, like getting Gabriel Murphy out there, getting Dallas Turner out there, even giving a little bit to someone like Dwight McGlothern. Like they need these guys in games. They need them to have a rotation that is constantly coming in and out, because even if they play a normal amount of plays, 65 plays against the Chicago Bears, the play total is still growing and growing and growing each week. And I think that the Vikings, it's like to their detriment sometimes, are hitting on big plays. I mean, when they score on that long touchdown and then Kirk comes back and responds, it's like, well, yeah, because the defense was just out there, and sorry, Sam Darnold threw a 50-yard touchdown. You can't tell him not to. You want 50-yard touchdowns, but that's always been, college football teams know this, when they have those high pace, fast scoring, run up and down the field, their defenses are always bad because they get worn down and then they're exhausted. And that's where the Vikings have to have a plan for that. And they had it for a few of the games, but then I think they kind of lost that thread a little bit in the first half of the last couple games. Life is about the odds says if Sam plays like he did yesterday on Monday, you have to wonder if this is going on a Kurt Warner light comes on type of run. Kurt Warner had one of the all-time great seasons. There's nothing that could be quite like that. But what we're seeing from Sam Darnold is that if you didn't know anything about Sam Darnold, this is the best way to figure out how you feel about it. If you didn't know anything about, let's say you knew football, but you didn't know any background on Sam Darnold, and you didn't know they drafted this other quarterback that you like, and then you watched the last 4 games, what would you think of Sam Darnold? I mean, it's not, will the light come on? I mean, the light is on. The light is on bright over the whole season. It is. I mean, this is top 10, top 7 quarterback play in the league is the accumulation of him this season. He's 7th by PFF. He's 3rd by quarterback rating. These are numbers of quarterbacks who compete for Super Bowls, franchise quarterback type of performances. But also another thing that's worth saying is that if they have a bad game, if Darnold has a bad game against Chicago, against Seattle, we don't have to do the thing where we go, same old, like, no, we've seen a couple bad games. We've seen him bounce back. We don't have to do that with every single game. Does not have to be a referendum at this point on how good Sam Darnold can be, because we've seen that over a pretty large sample size now, even going back to 2022. He's just good at playing quarterback for this football team. If you take him and put him on the worst team in the league, would he be this good? Probably not. Who would? But I've always thought, don't apologize for what you could put around your quarterback when he plays great. But then there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do with receivers, with coaching, with play calls. Sometimes you need a quarterback who has the pure talent to make it all happen. And that's where Darnold is different from almost any other story that's like this. The only one I could think of is like Steve Young, where he had the talent, but was with Tampa Bay and it was a mess. And then he goes to San Francisco and becomes an all-time great. But that's another example of someone who had the talent. And that's what Sam Darnold has, is the talent to do this. So we don't have to do the real or fake every single week. If he throws 2 interceptions in a game, well, yeah, he's going to throw some picks. It happens. Like, maybe, he'll take some sacks or he'll have a bad game at some point, because quarterbacks do sometimes. Even really good quarterbacks do sometimes. Over the last 4, it doesn't seem super likely that he's going to just throw for 350 yards and have a perfect quarterback rating in every one of those games. But we have gone past the old Sam, real fake Sam, fraud Sam. Like, I think we've gone past that. This is just a really, really excellent passing game being operated by someone who's super, super talented. And the rest in the future is going to figure itself out from there. Jeff says we haven't had a quarterback that could overcome in-game adversity since Favre. That element missing and means you're not a true contender. Some of that with Teddy early in his career, but even like you said about Bradford, and it's not that, Kirk had comebacks. He had all those comebacks in 2022. It's not that he could never do something like that. It's just that it was so many times in big games that we walked out of there with a lot of excuses, a lot of, well, the line couldn't block the Bears, or, well, they hit Kirk early in the game and that's why. And it would be games against Washington with Taylor Heineke starting that, a game-winning drive. Like, that's good. And, 1 score wins count and all that. And we went through that in 2022. But then the big game happens against Green Bay and you lose. They're just, so often that was the case. And then we walk out going, well, the defense wasn't good enough. Well, the guards weren't good enough. Well, the whatever. And we just haven't had to do that for this team, because you do have somebody who gets put in a tough spot sometimes and finds a way out of it. Mike says if Pace and Gilmore can come back healthy and they can avoid any major injuries, it will be fun to watch. That is another part of this that is really big when we're talking about the defense, is that they have been without either Cashman or Pace in a lot of these games. And if they have both of them, I don't think, they didn't lose any games without both of them. For sure, didn't lose any games. But when it comes to just how they played defensively, they were really difficult to deal with when it came to having both Pace and Cashman in, because Pace is a great blitzer. Cashman is a do-it-all guy. And them trying to replace either one of those has been kind of a nightmare. Kamu Grugier-Hill made a couple plays early in the season. Josh Metellus is being asked to play pure linebacker, which is really tough for a guy who's 210 pounds. They're running out Jamin Davis, who did pretty well in his handful of snaps. They need both of those guys healthy. And credit to Fabian Morrow, who played really well in that football game, but you need Stephon Gilmore. If it's a fully healthy defense, and then you're looking at some other teams that are banged up on defense, like the Lions, that's your edge. That is your edge. Marley says, did you see pictures shared by Adam Thielen that his son and friends drew up plays for Adam, Diggs, Jefferson, and McCaffrey? I'm fairly convinced that he could draw up a better trick play than KOC. If the worst thing that your coach does is struggle with trick plays and maybe tries too hard to hit deep balls, then that's a pretty good thing if that's the biggest criticism, because there's a lot worse around the league But you got to stop with that. You know what's going to happen is I'm going to spend all this time complaining about the trick plays. And then the first play of the playoffs will be some double reverse 75-yard touchdown or something. And then you could all laugh at me for complaining about it the whole time. But it's not even just that they run trick plays, which I don't love to begin with. It's that they run them and they're always weird. They like having they won't even put Ty Chandler in the game. And against San Francisco, they wanted to throw a pass. Like what? And yesterday, a triple reverse. You're flipping the ball, and then throwing a screen in the red zone. And once all your linemen go over to one side, they know what's going on. And I don't get it. Explain to me like I'm 5 why these trick plays are necessary. We can just hand them off. Ryan says, I saw Gabriel Murphy got some playing time, wondering how you thought he looked. I will look at that on tape a little bit more when I go back. Tuesday is always my day to look at the all 22, but I can tell you he graded well by PFF, above average grade, had a pressure mixed in there, a couple of plays, but it sounded from Kevin O'Connell like they were very happy with the way that he played. I think he used the word flashed or hustle to the ball, something like that. Yeah, I mean, having somebody like that show up on your defense that they were very excited about in training camp. They were really excited about Gabriel Murphy in camp. And then he's just here in the middle of the season. That's like getting a new player. That's like suddenly having a player show up on your team like you signed him. And it's a little bit of an extra, just a body out there. And they're going to need that. And that's what I want to see toward the end of the season is just a little bit more of the rotating on defense earlier in the game. They've been doing it later in the game, but earlier in the game, they might want to start doing that, getting Gabe Murphy in there, getting Dallas Turner in there, so they're not in the third quarter feeling like extremely gassed. Marley says a majority of the teams, especially the Lions, have drafted extremely well in the top 3-4 rounds. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has not. Would be the same issue Rick had, expensive quarterback, bad drafting. I'm just like, if they bring back Sam Darnold, they will still have everything they have on this 11-2 football team. They will have cap space still to sign. Remember, they're spending $40 million on the quarterback position as we speak. And they did this. You guys just overrate the drafting thing sometimes. It's not whether you just draft the players. It's how many good players you actually have. It doesn't really matter how you get them. And I understand, there's a salary cap. But when you're in win now mode, there kind of isn't. There's pushing money around. And then down the road, yeah, you're going to have to deal with that. But there is enough cap space that they were able to create and cash that their ownership is able to spend to bring in these guys that are free agents, to extend the superstars, and then to find the other pieces. Find a Gabriel Murphy who's going to play a role here. Find a Jalen Redmond. Find the pieces that have fit in. The drafting by the entire franchise has netted them a lot of really good talents, like Christian Darrisaw, like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and a draft pick spent for TJ Hawkinson. And then they've put together the defense in a different way by signing free agents that their defensive coordinator really wanted, or getting Byron Murphy as a free agent. It all counts the same, whether the guy's good or not. The Vikings have as many good players as any team in the league. And maybe the Lions are the only team that's a little better. The problem is, you talk about how great they drafted. They tanked, though. The Vikings did not tank. They were not in a position to tank with their ownership. It would have, I'm sure, if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was drafting with all the picks that they had, they accumulated 1 million of them, then they would have done better. And you're going to have to prove it if you think that drafting is not random. You're going to have to show me a study, show me a team that consistently did it well over a long period of time, because it's just not the case. The Vikings have drafted like 15 players. I mean, truly, they've drafted like 15 players since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah got here. To me, it's just foolish to talk about like, oh, you just can't draft or whatever. I don't understand that at all, other than just the draft obsession. And people are far too obsessed with the draft. So it's not, they're 11-2, And if they bring back Sam Darnold in the future with all of the same things that they have now, they can continue to compete. And if they got an Ivan Pace Jr., a great player, as an undrafted free agent, oh, well, of course you can't draft, but they'll have 4 undrafted free agents out here playing, and it'll be like, oh, you can't draft. Okay, well, that's fine. The key to the thing is, can you build a team that gets to 11-2? And they did. And can you do it with a $40 million cap hit from your quarterback position? They did, because they do right now. So they could in the future. Is that the same as having the rookie quarterback contract? No, it's not. But we act like it's an impossibility that a team could have a contract for a quarterback and still win, even though every team in the NFC that's winning, except for Washington, has paid their quarterback. None of this is impossible. The New Orleans Saints stretched open their window how long with Drew Brees, and they paid players and they added guys and all those things. And you can do it when you're in your window. The thing is that the quarterback has to be good enough. And at this moment, the quarterback is good enough, and that's Sam Darnold. But, drafting is fun. I will admit that. Drafting is really fun. Manny picking Detroit's schedule. Maybe we need to do that on Thursday. Where's Drew McGarry? He's coming on later this week. I got to get the schedule for the media so I can figure out exactly when, because Monday Night Football changes things a lot with the schedule. So Manny is awesome. I agree with that, Brett. Thank you. How about the Wild? I just can't pay attention to anything else until the season is over. But when the season is over, I'm back on hockey. Maybe I'll get to a game here. I'm going to try. I've got some things going on this week. I'm hosting twice on WCCO radio, if you guys want to check that out, tomorrow night and on Friday. So I got a lot going on. I have not been able to pay attention to the hockey a lot. I mean, I've seen what the Wild are doing, but them and the Wolves, like, I'm only just kind of in the background while I'm working. So anyway, yeah, well, here we are. What a time. Vikings are 11-2. A lot to discuss this week. Kevin Seifert, Drew McGarry. I'm sure Courtney Cronin will pop in later at some point. So we'll load it up on great guests for this week. Jeremiah Searles tomorrow. Make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. And we'll see where this journey takes us. But man, come off a game like that, and then Monday Night Football against the Bears. What a freaking football season it is. So thanks you guys for the great chat as always tonight, to Manny for picking the schedule as he always does. And we will catch you guys always, it seems, always, every day. There's going to be something new coming out. And even Sunday to Monday, I'll react to the games and everything else. So can't wait. What a great time to be talking about football. So thanks everybody for all of your time, and we'll talk to y'all later. Football.